What turns a man into a monster? Poverty, power, or something darker? In Baghdad, a dictator rises through blood. In Belgrade, a lawyer smiles as nations fall. Saddam Hussein and Slobodan Milošević didn't just wage war, they weaponized identity, fear, and memory. But were they born to rule or made to destroy? Stay with us as we uncover the roots of their terror. Before we move on to the next part, please give me a like and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for listening. Baghdad, 1979. The heat clings to the walls like smoke. On a palace balcony, a man in a military suit stares into the horizon. This is Saddam Hussein, newly crowned president of Iraq, hailed by loyalists as the guardian of Arab unity. But behind the applause is fear. Within days, he forces party members to watch and carry out executions of their comrades. 22 die in a single purge. That moment sets the tone for a rule that would claim over 1 million lives. 10 years later, in Belgrade, a very different scene unfolds. A calm, bespectacled lawyer steps up to a podium in Kosovo Polje, addressing a crowd of 1 million Serbs. Slobodan Milošević doesn't shout. He doesn't need to. His words stir something older than politics: grievances, myths, vengeance. That speech in 1989 doesn't just echo through the crowd. It opens the door to a decade of ethnic war that will tear Yugoslavia apart. Saddam and Milošević came from different worlds. Saddam was born in 1937 in the dusty village of Al-Auja, near Tikrit. Raised in poverty, he lived in a mud hut, dropped out of school, and was beaten by his stepfather. Violence shaped his worldview early. He joined the Ba'ath Party as a teenager and climbed the ranks through loyalty and calculated brutality. By the time he seized power, he already had blood on his hands. Milošević, born in 1941 in the Serbian town of Požarevac, grew up in a middle-class family. His father was a priest, his mother a teacher. Unlike Saddam, he pursued education, studied law at the University of Belgrade, and entered politics as a bureaucrat. For years he seemed unremarkable, until Yugoslavia began to unravel. In the chaos after Tito's death, Milošević saw opportunity. His rise wasn't through bullets, but through bureaucracy, speeches, and the slow manipulation of public fear. The scale of their crimes would eventually draw global outrage. Saddam's campaigns devastated entire populations. From 1986 to 1989, during the Anfal campaign, he ordered the deaths of 50,000 to 180,000 Kurds, flattening villages and using chemical weapons in places like Halabja, where 5,000 people suffocated in a single day. In 1991, when Shiites in the south rose against him after the Gulf War, Saddam responded with mass executions that killed between 30,000 and 60,000 people. His war with Iran, begun in 1980, lasted 8 years and left 1 million dead on both sides. Milošević took a different route. His hands were rarely visible in the bloodshed, but his words and policies enabled it. In Bosnia, Serbian forces under his influence committed acts the International Criminal Tribunal would later classify as genocide. The Srebrenica massacre of 1995 killed 8,372 Bosniak men and boys in a single operation. In Kosovo, from 1998 to 1999, Serbian forces killed 13,000 Albanians and displaced 1.5 million more. His regime used media to incite ethnic hatred, turning neighbor against neighbor, normalizing violence in the name of national unity. The brutality of both men was unparalleled among late 20th century rulers. Colombian drug lord Pablo Escobar is estimated to have killed 4,000 people through assassinations and bombings. Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, the Mexican cartel leader, orchestrated trafficking operations that indirectly caused thousands of deaths. But unlike these criminals, Saddam and Milošević had the machinery of the state behind them. Escobar craved wealth. Gallardo sought invisibility. Saddam and Milošević wanted history. Their rise poses a disturbing question. How do two men from modest backgrounds, one a street fighter, the other a civil servant, end up wielding state power to commit atrocities at such scale? The answer lies not only in who they were, but in how they ruled. That's where we turn next. Saddam Hussein ruled through terror that was both visible and overwhelming. Power, to him, was a performance, a spectacle of force meant to paralyze opposition before it could form. He reshaped Iraq's institutions into instruments of surveillance and violence, empowering the feared Mukhabarat intelligence service and the elite Republican Guard to crush dissent with absolute ruthlessness. After the Gulf War, when Shiite uprisings erupted in the south, Saddam ordered mass executions, bulldozed entire towns, and drained the marshes that had sheltered rebels for centuries. The message was unmistakable. Resistance would be punished with extinction. His use of chemical weapons against Kurdish civilians in Halabja in 1988 revealed not just military brutality, but psychological warfare. Survivors described skies that turned green and children collapsing where they stood. Saddam didn't hide these atrocities. He allowed whispers of them to spread. Fear was part of his governance. State media declared him the Knight of the Arabs, and his face appeared on murals, money, school books, an omnipresent symbol of a regime that blurred the line between loyalty and survival. Even among allies, trust was fatal. In his first year as president, he summoned Ba'ath Party members to a conference, accused several of treason, and had them executed by their colleagues. The spectacle was recorded and broadcast. He wept during the broadcast, not for the dead, but as an actor, reinforcing his myth of reluctant power. Slobodan Milošević, in contrast, ruled with a colder touch. His genius lay in manipulation, not open terror. He rarely gave direct orders for violence. Instead, he gave space, room for paramilitary groups to form, spread, and kill. In the wars of Yugoslav succession, he empowered nationalist militias under men like Ratko Mladić and Jelko Ražnatović, known as Arkan, whose units committed massacres in Bosnia and Kosovo. Though he formally distanced himself from these actors, funding and arms flowed from Belgrade, and the pattern of atrocities mirrored the policies Milošević endorsed. His most dangerous weapon was not an army, but a narrative. Through state television, newspapers, and public speeches, he rewrote recent history, painting Serbs as perpetual victims and their neighbors as existential threats. The infamous speech at Kosovo Polje in 1989 signaled not just defiance toward the West, but a promise of retribution. Nationalism became a currency, spent recklessly to consolidate power. While Saddam's dominance was imposed with overwhelming force, Milošević's was built on consent, forged in fear, misinformation, and historical grievance. Saddam's war with Iran and his invasion of Kuwait in 1990 show a leader willing to gamble regional destruction for personal legacy. Milošević, meanwhile, exploited Yugoslavia's collapse to redraw borders, backing campaigns of ethnic cleansing that killed civilians and displaced millions. Saddam acted like a conqueror from another era. Milošević behaved like a man managing a slow-motion implosion. In comparing them, Saddam's approach resembled that of Pablo Escobar, who bombed cities and assassinated judges to intimidate the state. But Saddam didn't need to intimidate the state. He was the state. Escobar's violence was criminal and opportunistic. Saddam's was systematic, state-sanctioned, and ideological. Milošević was more like Miguel Angel Felix Gallardo, rarely seen on the front lines, yet coordinating vast networks of violence from behind closed doors. But even Gallardo, for all his indirect cruelty, did not aim to reshape the ethnic or political map of a continent. What they shared was a profound lack of empathy, a view of human life as expendable, and a belief that power justified anything. Saddam viewed himself as a redeemer of the Arab world, a man destined to restore lost glory. Milošević saw himself as the guardian of Serbia, willing to unleash horror in defense of a mythologized nation. One ruled through overwhelming force, the other through invisible threads of manipulation. The result was the same: bloodshed on a scale that scarred generations. As we turn to the aftermath of their rule, the question deepens, not just how they operated, but what their reigns left behind. Because when the killing stops, what remains is not just silence, but the shape of the world they destroyed. When Saddam Hussein's regime collapsed in 2003, Iraq did not rise from the ruins. It fell deeper into them. The war that ousted him, led by the United States, left a power vacuum that spiraled into civil conflict, insurgency, and the eventual rise of ISIS. The structures Saddam built, his prisons, his secret police, his networks of patronage and fear, were dismantled almost overnight, but what replaced them was chaos. According to the World Bank, Iraq's GDP dropped by 20% between 2003 and 2010, and sectarian violence claimed tens of thousands of lives in the years that followed. Saddam had ruled through division. When he was gone, those divisions erupted into war. He was captured in December 2003, found hiding in a hole near Tikrit. His trial before the Iraqi Special Tribunal was meant to symbolize a new era of justice, but it was criticized for being rushed and politically influenced. Amnesty International questioned the fairness of the process, especially given the U.S. role in orchestrating it. Saddam was sentenced to death for the Dujail massacre, where 148 Shiite villagers were killed in 1982 following a failed assassination attempt. He was hanged in December 2006. His final moments were filmed and leaked, showing guards taunting him before the drop. For many Iraqis, it brought closure. For others, especially among Sunni populations, it deepened the sense of alienation and injustice. Even in death, Saddam remained a source of division. Slobodan Milošević's end came more slowly and more quietly. After his fall from power in 2000, he was arrested and extradited to The Hague to stand trial before the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. The charges against him were sweeping: genocide, crimes against humanity, war crimes, 66 counts in total. He was the first sitting head of state to be tried for such crimes in an international court. Unlike Saddam, Milošević used his trial as a platform. He refused to acknowledge the tribunal's legitimacy, conducted much of his own defense, and turned proceedings into a political stage. But in March 2006, before a verdict could be reached, he died of a heart attack in his prison cell. The trial had lasted 4 years. His death denied victims and survivors the verdict they had long awaited. For some, it felt like justice delayed had become justice denied. Carla Del Ponte, the tribunal's lead prosecutor, later described him as a master manipulator, guilty in fact, though never formally convicted. In Serbia, his legacy remains contested. Some view him as a nationalist who defended Serb interests during a time of Western interference. Others see him as the architect of catastrophe, responsible for wars that killed over 130,000 people and displaced more than 4 million across the former Yugoslavia. The scope of their crimes can be compared, but the nature of their impact was distinct. Saddam's reign destroyed Iraq's social fabric, setting the stage for decades of instability, not just within Iraq, but across the Middle East. His use of chemical weapons, scorched earth policies, and mass repression set a precedent for state-sponsored terror. Milošević, on the other hand, fractured a multi-ethnic country into ethnic enclaves, many of which still simmer with unresolved tensions. The collapse of Yugoslavia led to 7 new states, but the memory of war remains sharp in places like Bosnia, Kosovo, and Serbia. When viewed beside figures like Pablo Escobar or Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo, the difference is scale and intent. Escobar killed indiscriminately to maintain control over cocaine routes. Gallardo built an empire to remain invisible. Saddam and Milošević used the full force of the state not for wealth or escape, but to inscribe their visions of nationhood onto history, no matter the cost. Escobar's victims numbered in the thousands. Saddam and Milošević left behind fields of bones, cities turned to rubble, and societies permanently divided. Their deaths closed 2 chapters in modern history, but the questions they raise remain urgent. What allows men like these to rise? Is it ideology, charisma, fear, or the silence of those who could have stopped them earlier? Their crimes were different in method, yet similar in effect. Nations broken, lives lost, and futures stolen. Justice came too late and in incomplete forms, but the responsibility to remember remains. Because the real legacy of Saddam Hussein and Slobodan Milošević is not only the horror they caused, but the warning they left behind. The ruins of Halabja and the graves of Srebrenica are more than history. They're warnings. Saddam and Milošević are gone, but the systems they used, propaganda, division, unchecked power, still echo today. Whether in new wars or rising autocracies, the pattern remains. If this story made you think, hit the like button and subscribe for more deep dives into power, history, and the human cost of leadership. And now we want to hear from you. Who was more dangerous, Saddam, with his brutality in plain sight, or Milošević, who turned lies into war? Drop your thoughts in the comments.